I went home and I just couldn't stop thinking about her.
When you're in country and you're sitting still and idle, that's a bad sign.
She no longer had a heartbeat. She wasn't breathing. That was the first one on the chest. I started compressions first.
Need advocates. We need people that are going to hold companies, government, hold these people accountable.
Welcome to the Heroes Debrief. My name is Jordan White, founder of Hero Services, Navy veteran and current working paramedic. We're bringing Captain Shawn Morton to wound up have an opportunity to tell his story and give us a little perspective on the fire service. He has spent 26 years in the fire service and 12 years working on the ambulance. Just as a disclaimer for the content with the Heroes Debrief, this content is for mature audiences only, and if they're sensitive viewers, we highly encourage you to show some discretion. So, Shawn, why don't you start out telling us a little bit of who you are and a little bit of your background, getting started.
My name's Shawn. Again, get into the fire service seems like forever ago. I think 97 kind of decided I was gonna get into the fire department. With that, I had done some prior education through the police academy, thinking I was going to go in that direction initially, but that kind of didn't work out. Work kind of got in the way, and life happened. So I ended up had an opportunity to get in the fire service, and since then I've just been staying busy with that and everything else.
So what made you think about getting into like public safety as a whole?
Well, through high school, I actually kind of did that. I was a typical kid in high school, gotten, my fair share of little things. I didn't get in any major trouble, but had my girlfriend through high school, which ended up being my wife, had some uncles that were police officers, and that was kind of the initial, was going in that direction, and that's kind of where I initially was going to try to get going on that. So after we got into the schooling side, then like I said, I made it through about 2 years of education through that, and had a couple of things happen within the program. You had a certain amount of time to get everything completed, and one of the classes got kind of changed a little bit, so I wasn't able to complete it in time, and I would have had to go and take all of my criminal justice classes over at that point. Like I said, life started happening, and had to continue to work, continue to deal with providing for myself and the wife and all that. So it just kept us moving in that direction.
Was there anything specific that made you transition over into the fire department, or just kind of happened?
I always wanted to do the fire department, and I had, talked about that. Knew quite a few of the guys that were on the department. Ironically, one of the gentlemen that was at the department always made some references about, as long as I'm here, you'll probably never be on the fire department. And ironically, when the opportunity came for me to be there, the individual, because at that time we had to actually be sponsored to be on the department. Like somebody had to vouch for you to be even getting an opportunity to have a shot. And had a guy reach out that knew the wife, and was like, hey, you still want to be on the department? I understand this is what happened with this individual. And I said, yeah. He goes, cool. He said, come on in. So I actually kind of got started in the fire service, basically just almost, to show somebody up. And so it was kind of but after that, ironically to this day, I mean, I can still talk with that other individual. And, him and I were quite a bit alike. I think so. Sometimes that was, some of the issues, and I had actually worked with him in a high school job. So, I mean, kind of knew quite a bit about, obviously, the small town, the fire department. A lot of the people knew a lot of all those guys that were there. So it was a nice experience.
So, with your fire department, like what kind of community were you a part of? I guess, like how big of a department?
So when I initially got hired, I think we were 35, 36 people. It's all paid on call. No full time. We have an incorporated village, and we also run in a township, so we cover, like most of the departments in the county are, about 36 square miles. So that's what we cover. And again, like I said, we had the village side of it and the township side. So ironically, pretty much about the same population between the two, from in the village to what we have in the township.
Okay. So you said about 35 people on the department when you first got hired?
Right.
How many do you have now?
I want to say we're probably around 20, maybe 18, 20.
So the call volume must have dropped then.
Negative.
Oh,
Call volume actually has gone up quite a bit.
yeah.
I think when I first started, we were somewhere in that 400 to 500 call range, and I think this year we're actually going to hit probably 1150. So the call volume's gone up on just keeping the people and the requirements of everything for the job. I think is kind of hard to do. Getting some of the new people to come in for that. With all of the requirements of things we have to do. It's just the commitment side of it. I think that everybody's busy.
Yeah.
So
We'll get more into that a little bit later, but yeah. So when you first got hired in, and you got that department of 35 people or whatever, what was the dynamics of the station like? I guess, is it the typical fire family atmosphere? Or?
Yeah, I mean, we had we had a lot of people that would be there for every call. I mean, it was almost like you had to race to get to the station to even make a truck. I mean, we had that many people that were active, responding, being involved, and then the atmosphere as far as family wise. I mean, being the new guy, you were kind of that rookie. You were more or less to be seen and not heard so much. You needed to learn. You needed to see what was going on, and not that it was done mean, not that it was done to belittle anybody. Just a little bit different era of hey, you basically, you're a rookie. You don't get a say.
Yeah.
You get to do this, and this is what we're going to do, and so. That's kind of changed a little bit.
Yeah. But from the military side, you kind of just need to have a couple years of putting your time in, I guess,
yeah,
and earning your keep, so to speak. Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. You almost had to kind of prove yourself a little bit, like, see that you're going to go through things. Man, that the first year that we were on, because there were 4 of us that got hired at the same time. And I am the only one that's left out of those 4, still with the department. But everybody was like, are you guys, doing stuff? Because that year we had like more fires than normal. And I don't know why. We were busy. And of course they kept asking us, you guys out doing something you're not supposed to? And we're like, no. And obviously we weren't, but they were like, wow. I mean, picked up with fire calls, so we had a lot of opportunity to run a bunch of stuff before we even got into fire school. I mean, so, and there again, that's some of the change. You know, now when you start doing this, you've got to do the fire school. You don't get as much of the hands-on training until you get a little bit of experience with schooling, and they definitely watch how much we are able to get them to do. You know, my very first practice, I was in an air pack and inside something that was on fire. So, I mean, we really can't do that now.
You don't even do that in school.
No, they don't do any live Normally, they don't have any live fire training during fire school.
They should.
They should.
I think they should.
Yeah. With all the stuff that we're doing, I mean, we go through all the steps and processes, but they're not getting what it's actually like to be in a fire. And, you know, sometimes that's when they find out whether they want to do this or not. I mean, and it's not just the fire stuff. It's the accidents we go to. It's the medical calls that we go to. But
So when you first started in the fire service, were you running medical car accidents and fires?
yeah, we did medical first response. You know, we would respond to all the car accidents. The department that I was with was pretty well known for extrication, which is, you know, basically, you know, getting people out of cars that have been in accidents. So the department itself was very active in that. I know that we also went and competed in competitions for extrication as well.
You still are pretty well known for extrications, right?
Yeah. The department definitely, you know, put a lot of time into that and training, and we still are pretty well known for, you know, if there's an accident, you know, get that department involved. So
Yeah. It runs smoothly. I mean, you and I have been on on scenes where you guys were doing extrications and I was running the ambulance side of things, and it does go pretty smooth. So, how has like the lifestyle being in your department changed over the years? Because you're coming in with significant amount of experience with the fire service. Like, how would you, if anything, how would you say that has changed in your time?
You're talking about individually, the guys change?
Yeah, and the department, both.
Well, you know, I would say, you know, sometimes individually that, you know, the longer that you're involved, that some of the guys try to, you know, back off a little bit, maybe don't get as involved. Obviously, you know, we're not getting any younger. You know, the fire service is definitely a little bit more of a younger person's game. You know, to be able to, you know, go in and do some of the things. But we still have a pretty core group of guys that get involved, and they stay involved. Sometimes we're starting to see that, you know, they'll back off a little bit, maybe not run as many calls. You know, it'll be like, hey, I've been there, done that, and, you know, I don't want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go to this call. I don't want to, you know, oh yeah, hey, here's this fire. Okay, well, we're going to go to that, and man, we're going to be there forever. And, you know, I don't want to have to, you know, do all the, you know, rolling of the hose and cleaning afterwards, you know. But, so that's changed a little bit with some of the guys as they stay on. But as far as the department itself, we're running into the same thing every other department is running into, keeping people there. You know, things change. You know, when I got started, I was, you know, not even married. We were, you know, looking at, no, I actually was married at that time when we started, and then ended up, you know, had to deal with that time, you know, spending time with, you know, the family, and, you know, going to run calls, and, as you get older, you spend more time with, your family. You get involved with, kids and sports and everything else. But, so that's what you start seeing towards the end, or as people progress through this service, I think a little bit, is they don't tend to be there as much. They're like, oh, well, it's this again. I don't need to go to that. I've already been there, done that, ran a bunch of those. So I think you start seeing a little bit of that within the departments as well. And it's not all of them. I'm saying every person. I still stay pretty involved. I've probably been involved with being probably one of the higher numbers of calls per year in probably the last 12 to 15 years on the department. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that I'm probably a little bit more of an exception to that, because I think I do run a little bit more than some. But our younger generation that's coming in, a lot of the guys when they get in, they're all gung ho and they want to run, they want to do all this, but then things start changing. They start getting families. They start going to get more things. Work gets more involved. They don't have as much time to devote to the department sometimes. So, and that seems to be pretty much industry standard.
Yeah.
A lot of departments, unless you're working at a full-time department where you're specifically there for a shift and this is what you do. The paid on call aspect, or the volunteer, there's very few departments that are actually volunteer anymore. But yeah, it's changed.
So you're a paid on call firefighter and full time, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I've been paid on call through the department since '97. Still there. 2 years ago, I took a full-time job at a department that does transporting BLS up by Grand Traverse area. So I work there. We basically work a 48-96 schedule. So we work 48 hours straight, and then we have 96 hours off.
What's the call volume up there?
The call volume up there, I think we're probably 750 calls a year. Again, most of those are going to be medical. So we do a lot of medical calls. We transport patients with an ambulance up there, which is a little bit different than the department down here.
Right.
Department here, it's a first response. You help get the patient to the ambulance, and then we go back to the station. So there, we're actually transporting the patients and still doing the fire stuff as well. So
Okay. So prior to you getting your full-time firefighter spot up north, what were you doing for a full-time job prior to that?
well, if I go back to the beginning a little bit of when I started doing that, I've worked factory jobs. I've done heating and cooling. I've done iron work. During all of that, I stayed on the fire department as well. So I did the full-time job on top of the paid on call thing. And then I did that for a while, and I basically got involved with the fire department. I ended up actually getting hurt doing iron work, and I actually had to take some time off. And I worked the fire department paid on call, and then was able to pretty much get in there almost into like a full-time status. I mean, I worked there Monday through Friday during the day, worked in the office, ran calls during the day, and then I got this thought of, hey, let's jump on an ambulance. I've got my EMT, and so I ended up joining a local ambulance service as a basic, and was able to, work there full time for quite a few years, and then I ended up going down to part time when I took the full time job, up north. So, and I still, pick up shifts on the ambulance when I can. So.
But even when you're only doing the paid on call fire service, you were qualified as an EMT, is that
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that you were, correct me if I'm wrong, you were higher licensure than what was required of the fire department?
The department for paid on call is just MFR, which is medical first responder. That's all that we had to be licensed to. And when I got done taking that, I kind of was like, man, I don't know if I know enough to be out there. Again, I was 24, 25 years old at the time. I'm going, man, I really want to learn a little bit more of this to be dealing with patients. So I took an EMT class directly following. So, and then basically the way our department was set up, that we had certain nights that were open that anybody could run. We didn't schedule anybody. And a lot of times I ended up getting involved with that. That night, there were a lot of times when I might be the only person showing up. So I had pretty much to start being able to, assess patients, go through that, be able to help do what I can, with the levels that we could at that time. Mm-hmm. And so that was how I kind of got involved with a little bit more of the medical side. So.
So talk a little bit more about showing up and being the first one there and the only one there.
Yeah. So that at first, it was pretty nerve wracking. You're sitting there going, these people are expecting me to take care of them, and they're expecting me to know what to do, and so you initially would get involved and. If you had other people there, you could always, kind of fall back on having them with you. But when you were the only one there, sometimes, until the ambulance showed up, it's not like we were the only ones that showed up. But we might be there, 5-10 minutes before the ambulance gets there, depending on where they were coming from. And it sometimes was like, okay, they're looking to you for an answer or help. And when you were the only one there, you're going, okay, I kind of need to know what to do.
Yeah.
So,
and as a firefighter, you have a pretty limited tool set.
Correct.
In comparison to the ambulance.
Correct.
And even when the ambulance gets on scene, they have a pretty limited tool set in comparison to an emergency room. So, that is an aspect in the first response world that I don't think is quite realized.
Right.
As well as it should be from the general public, is there are a lot of times where it's like just a firefighter that shows up on scene, or maybe it's a crew of 2 or 3 people.
Right.
And if it's a bigger scene, that can get very hectic very quickly.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and if you're there with, one patient, I mean, that's, kind of a one-on-one thing. But if you're the first person that gets there and you're dealing with multiple patients, that pretty well gets overwhelming pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, even sometimes dealing with one patient, depending on what you're doing, could be overwhelming for one person.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was definitely, for me, that was kind of that whole push as well to keep going a little bit more with that education for the medical side. And I pretty well stayed up on as much of that as I can, throughout the years. Even now getting on the department up north where I'm working on an ambulance, and I've worked on an ambulance before, but normally it's been with a paramedic. So we're both basics on that truck. And again, that was going into those calls as a basic going, I don't have the paramedic here to kind of help, lean on a little bit. We got to make some decisions again, and until we get to a paramedic or have them show up. So that was a little bit, kind of that same feeling initially of getting in there to being on the fire department and responding by yourself.
Yeah.
So
up north on your basic transporting unit, does your partner have as much experience as you? Is that pretty comparable?
Yeah, a couple of the guys are pretty good with the experience level. We've got some newer guys that probably 5 years or less experience. Okay. But Yeah, there's a couple of us that are up there that have got, a few years in.
Okay.
So, but, we can hire people, and we have hired people that haven't had a whole lot of experience on the ambulance side of it. They might have their fire certification and be, 3-4 years in that, and then, they might have a couple years of their EMT, but never worked too much on an ambulance.
Right.
So, I mean, getting those people acclimated to how things work helps. So,
Do you ever get any like brand new EMTs coming straight out of school hired in up there?
not so much on the full-time side. We also have some paid on call on that department as well. And we will see some of that on the paid on call side.
Okay.
And they are able to, help jump on the truck as well and help with medicals. So, yeah, we've got a few right now that are going through and just getting finished with their EMT class that are on the paid on call side.
Okay.
So, and then again, we've got people that have had their EMT license that have had it for a while and just don't do that enough. They don't
Right.
get in the truck enough. And
Yeah.
they're not that comfortable with it.
And it is a similar world to the fire department, but to the fire service, but it is a different world too, being in the back of the ambulance.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually running on the ambulance in comparison to being a basic on a fire department responding to calls, there's some nuances there for sure. So was there anything specific? Well, you said that you wanted to get your basic license for better
More or
understanding.
less, I almost kind of felt like I didn't know enough coming out of the MFR to be doing that, and it's not knocking, the license level. It's just, for me personally, I didn't feel like I wanted to have a little more training. So that's why I went into the EMT, which got a lot more of your anatomy and physiology stuff. There's a few more things that we can do if we're licensed at that level. But just the general knowledge of why things are doing what they're doing.
And the speed of which you wound up getting through that course. Because I think when I wound up going through, are both of them 6 month long?
Yeah, the first response is that. And then the EMT class, I think, I don't know if it was quite that long.
I
But
can't.
it was kind of like a, jump to the EMT from like the matriculation course.
Right.
From the MFR, so.
So when I went through it, I think I wound up getting my MFR with the fire department. And then during that time period, I decided that I was going to get my medic. So I basically took my MFR, got done with that, took my basic, got done with that, and then started right into paramedic. So that wound up turning out to be in just over like 2 years, but the majority of that was paramedic.
Right.
So, yeah. So you got any like really specific calls that come to mind as far as starting out in the fire service or EMS?
Oh, yeah. So when I got hired, what was it, July of '97, I was working at a local, not factory, more or less processing plant. With that, I had a pager. Again, I'd only been on the department maybe a month. It was August, and I don't know why, but again, I worked third shift. I had the pager open, and I normally don't. So, meaning, if it's closed, that the pager's going to only alert you and beep when it's your tones and your call. And if you have it open, you can listen to everything else that's going on in the county that's on that end, on the north end. So, I actually was, and again, I don't know why. I had the pager open. And I heard my parents' address for a medical call. And it was for my dad, and I ended up knowing my father very well that he wasn't going to call for an ambulance unless he absolutely needed to. I I had taken my dad to the hospital while he was having a stroke because he would not go in an ambulance. So, I mean, that's the type of call that. So when I heard the address, I was like, I better go. And I responded. And when I actually got there, my mom was holding on to him in a chair, and she's like, he just passed. So I ended up picking my dad up, and we started CPR. That was my first experience doing any medical, really. I mean, I'd had some, again, training through the police academy, did CPR training and things like that, but I've never done CPR on anybody until then. So that was my first experience with actually, having CPR on a real patient.
We want to take a moment to thank our principal sponsors. These companies have supported Hero Services from a more general perspective rather than sponsoring a singular event. Window World, Paul Davis, and Bathworks have all committed to supporting Hero Services with their events as well as our various programs that we offer. Not only do these companies support Hero Services, but they have various other charitable donations as well. Please take the time to wind up looking into these companies in case you need any of your home renovation needs. I think that was good. So your first cardiac arrest in the field was on your father then?
Yeah. So, again, I had not been through the medical first response training with the department yet at that time. Like I said, I don't even know why. Never did I have that pager open, and I can only think now that there was a reason, and that probably was why. But yeah, I responded to that, and I remember I'll never forget the county deputy that showed up next. He was the first one that showed up other than me, and when
okay, interrupt. So you responded by yourself. This is one of those
I
calls.
responded by myself, yeah.
And you were first arriving on scene.
I arrived on scene first, yeah. My sister, so we had a long driveway. My sister was standing out at the end of the driveway because she wanted to make sure that people knew where to go. And I come, whipping up into the driveway, and I'm like, stay here, make sure the next, units coming in know where to go. And, of course I get up there and, there's my mom was sitting there holding on to my dad, and, and she just looked up at me and she's like, he just quit breathing.
Yeah, so she knew he was in cardiac arrest.
Correct.
Okay.
And he had some problems. He was born with an enlarged heart. He had, valve replacement done. He ended up having some COPD going on. Had some strokes in the past. So I mean, he'd had some medical issues. Again, he was 57 years old, so he wasn't very old.
No.
But yeah.
Were you aware that he was in cardiac arrest on the way to the house?
I did not know going to the call. The call came out basically as a difficulty breathing, and knowing my father again that he wouldn't have called for an ambulance unless it was bad.
Yeah.
He was just, like I said, I took him to the hospital actively having a stroke because he would not go in an ambulance. So, I mean, I'm like, Dad, you need to go. And he'd be like, I'm fine. He's actually slurred his words, and I'm going, this is not normal. This is not good. You need to go. So, but yeah, I mean, so I knew if he was calling an ambulance, and especially at the time, I think it was 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. I mean, I knew that it wasn't good going to the call, but I didn't know it was that bad.
Yeah.
Until I got there. And like I said, I don't know how, but that stuff just kind of all came back. The whole CPR thing. I've never done it on a real patient until then, and it was amazing to me just where that came back.
Yeah.
And you remembered what you needed to do. Like I said, the county deputy that got on scene next, I think was in a little shock because I had actually had a fire department shirt on that night. And when he got there, he's getting his stuff set up. He had an AED, started doing that. And I'm like, okay, you're good? And he's looking at me like, what are you talking about? You know, he's like, dude, you know. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Why aren't you helping?
I'm like, this is my dad. And he was just like deer in the headlight look, like, oh, okay. And then people from the fire department in that area started showing up because it was the neighboring department, not the one that I was actually working on. Of course, I knew who those people were. One of them actually was my wife's uncle that was on that department as well. He showed up, and yeah, we went through that whole process, and you know, they shocked him. I don't remember how many times, probably 2 or 3 times there. When the ambulance showed up, they went through their process. Never regained pulses at that point, and you know, so yeah, we went through that, and like I said, that was my first experience of dealing with that through like a first response type thing. And for a while, I mean, that always kind of came back.
Yeah.
Anytime you go to another call like that, you know, so it's definitely gotten way better, you know, through the years of dealing with that. But I couldn't tell you the number of cardiac arrest patients I've been on since then.
Yeah.
But ironically, I ended up running a call with the fire department later that day for, I don't even remember what the call was. I just remember that we had a call for something that I could go to at the time and went. And, you know, the funeral home, ironically, the director was actually on our department. And he showed up to, you know, pick up my dad. So, you know, I ended up helping him do all that and, you know, getting things going. So just that community involvement of knowing a lot of these people that are in the community that, you know, are working other jobs that, you know, like the funeral director, you know, was also on the fire department.
Right.
You know, somebody that you've, you know, dealt with a little bit. You know, at that time, like I said, it's only been a month since I've been on the department. And, you know, but after that, you know, definitely pushed, I think, a little bit more for me to get involved with, you know, that whole medical thing. And like I said, when I got done with the first section of MFR, I just still didn't feel like I knew enough and wanted to keep going.
So, during that time period, like, was your department, was your department an entity that you could like fall back on? Did they
Oh, absolutely.
check in on you and take care of you? And
Yeah, you know, it was pretty, I guess, good to see that the department, a lot of those guys, and again, I'd only been there a month, and, you know, I know for like the funeral, you know, we had people that showed up from the department that were there. You know, guys were there that, you know, they're like, hey, if you need something, let us know. You know, that's kind of that family, you know, atmosphere of that department, you know. And it's weird because, again, even if you got into a point where you had a disagreement with one of the guys or whatever was going on, when the calls happened or when something, you know, happened within personal to, you know, an individual on the department, that stuff well went out the window.
yeah. So, you had your fire department as a pretty good network to wind up relying on and going forward. Outside of that specific circumstance, like how has your personal family and then your fire service and your fire department family, how did all that kind of get intertwined?
Well, yeah, we, again, you get in a department like that, you know, kind of a small town community, you hang out with, you know, a lot of the same guys from the department, that's who we hung out with. I mean, we'd have get-togethers at the station. We'd have, get-togethers at people's houses. So you started getting, your family, involved with their families. So it wasn't just, I worked with you on a department, and then, now it's, my wife is, hanging out with your wife, or whatever it would be. And so we started getting a lot of that, and we had that family atmosphere, and, just, again, we'd go have cookouts. We'd have, pool parties at people's houses. So we'd, have that where everybody would, show up, and we'd have food and, hang out. We'd do some of that stuff at the stations. We started cooking out, certain days in the summertime, like, hey, we're going to be down here Sunday if anybody wants to show up. And we could get, 10, 12 people there, from the department, plus family. So, yeah, you started to, network with that group, which kind of, I don't know, in a way, I think in a way it kind of, you pulled away from some of the other social circles that maybe that you'd been involved with, that kind of more dealing with the people that know you a little bit more, know what you're doing, know what you're dealing with type thing. So I think, that was probably some of the start of pulling away from other social circles to a point as well.
Just everything's fire department.
Yeah. And I immersed myself in that quite a bit. Again, just wanting to be involved. I mean, wanting to be there. I've always had this, kind of weird phobia, fear, I guess you could call it, of not being there. Like if something was happening and somebody needed me for something more or less family-wise, things like that, of, not being able to be there. Mm-hmm. And I think some of that's carried into the fire and EMS side of things as well. So I pretty well immersed myself with a lot of that. And at that time, my family was quite young. I mean, we were, kids were young, didn't have as much school functions, softball stuff, things like that, outside of, just the normal day-to-day, school and everything else that they would do. But, as that changed and as they got a little bit older, we started doing a little bit more of that, to where I got involved with, coaching, which, I'd known that side of things. My dad coached and stuff when we were younger, so the same type of thing, kind of giving back. Mm-hmm. Hey, somebody was there to coach when I wanted to play, and, why not help out? So I got involved with, a Little League program as well. And yeah, we would get just, deal with the fire department, we're dealing with Little League stuff. Things started getting busier. Life starts changing a little bit.
Yeah.
But for me, through all of that, I still had fire. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd come out of work and run calls. If I worked iron work and I was 12-hour days, I'd run calls at night and, go to work the next day. So I pretty well immersed myself in that, mm-hmm. that whole fire community.
Okay, sounds a little nonstop.
Yeah, pretty much. Ran a lot of calls.
So how did your family respond to you running fire calls all the time?
At first, it was, I think it was that, hey, dad's going out and helping, dad's doing this type of thing, or, the wife at the time would be like, okay, yeah, I understand, because we'd leave for birthday parties or family get-togethers or Christmas, or, if we had those calls, I would go. kind of that whole sense of duty thing for me a little bit of, if I don't go, who else is going to go? I kind of had that thought, and so it was good at first, and then as things progressed, and this is years into it. I mean, like I said, I coached Little League, so I took time away from the department to go do that, which thankfully I was in a position where I could. And when I worked throughout the day, Monday through Friday, I mean, I could take off on a Thursday and we'd go do travel ball tournaments, and I'd be gone for the weekend, but then I'd be back, but I always had a pager. I always listened. If we got too far away and I couldn't hear it, I'd put the pager away. But if I was close, my pager's on. I was listening. They all got to do the same thing. Listening kind of got to a point where, as well, I remember a certain call as well that I responded with, and this is again early in the career, that we had responded to a house fire, and I was on call for the weekend. And my wife at the time would always listen to the scanner and, wanting to know what was going on, see what's happening. And we ended up going to a house fire that potentially had, 5 or 6 kids trapped in the house. We responded as the first truck. I think there were 3 of us on the truck, and we had pretty heavy fire inside the structure at the time, so much so that the door frame of the door was actually on fire. And we got there, and the engineer that stayed on the truck was like, "You guys aren't going in until we have somebody here to back you up." And we kind of, got everything ready, had hose laid out, had it charged, ready to go. As soon as the next engine pulled up on scene, which I think was a neighboring department, we hit the front door, going in. Again, you have that adrenaline of there's potentially people trapped in this house, and the fact that they were kids as well. I don't remember how far. It was probably 2-3 feet into the door. And all of a sudden, the hose got just yanked out of my hand. And it's hot. I mean, there's fire in there, of course.
Fire's hot.
Yeah, fire's hot.
One of the first things you learn.
But all of a sudden, I'm like calling for my partner, and he's not there. So I'm grabbing a hold of the hose and finding that it's going down through the floor. So this is my very first interior structure fire. So yelling and screaming, for my partner, hey, finally I heard him. In the process, back in the day, used to, we have a chin strap that goes around your helmet. It wasn't cool to wear a chin strap back then. You put it over the top of your helmet, just tighten it down. Well, the chin strap's there so it doesn't pull off your head. So sticking my head down, yelling and screaming through the floor, trying to get a hold of my partner, and next thing you know, my helmet falls off. So now that goes down in the basement. But, screaming, yelling, he ends up, calling back, ends up getting up onto the floor. He's kind of holding onto the edge of the floor, and it's getting hot, and the fire keeps banking down. So by this time, I think there was maybe 12 to 18 inches where the fire from the floor to where the fire was, and then everything above it was fire. So it's getting hot. So I ended up pulling the hose up through the floor. He ended up dropping back down into the hole, into the basement, or the next level down, because it was too hot. And ended up, getting some of the fire knocked down, cooling things off. Crew had come in. I yelled at them, "Hey, partner fell through the floor. We need a ladder. We need to get him up out of the floor." They came in, and we ended up, keeping it cooled down enough to where we ended up getting out. Once we got him up out of the basement, I shut things down and kind of left with him. And we'd done a lot of things, on the scene. Of course, both of us, our gear's hot enough. It's smoking, and I mean, it's definitely hot. I ended up switching on my air pack and put another bottle in it. I had to go find my helmet. Never did find it myself. One of the other guys found it from going in the backside of the house. But in that process, we got all done, and I take my mask off, and I had one of the firefighters had walked up to me, and she just got this panicked look on her face. And I'm going, what the heck? What's that all about? And she just walked away and never said nothing. I'm like, all right. So I'm sitting there, and my deputy chief comes up to me and looks at me, and he's like, you're done for the day. And I'm like, okay, what did I do? All right. I don't know what's going on. So I'm sitting there and taking gear off, kind of stressing down. It's hot. All of a sudden I start, top of my head, I'm like, man, it's kind of starting to sting. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, man, grab some water. Of course, you know me with water. I'm not real good with water. But I dumped it over my head, and I'm like, this is good. Cooled off. I'm like, all right, well, we're standing outside again, and it's sun shining. And I'm like, man, my head's getting hot. What's going on? Well, I didn't know when my helmet had come off. It actually pulled my Nomex hood, which is what goes around to help protect us as well. Pulled it away from the side of my mask, so the side of my face was opened. I had second-degree burns down the side of my face. I had skin kind of hanging, and then the top of my head was first and second-degree burns from, just being that hot. And now all the adrenaline is coming off. Now I'm getting to that point of, now I'm starting to feel this. Well, so during this whole process, okay, my wife is listening to the scanner.
So there was probably a mayday
She's
called out.
hearing all of this. Yeah, there's a mayday called, firefighter down, firefighter fell through the floor, firefighter burned. She's hearing all this. She ended up calling one of the other wives of one of the other firefighters. Is like, are you listening to this? What's going on? Who's there? I know he's there. I know he's at this fire. So, yeah. So they were like, you're going to go down to the burn center. I'm like, all right, I'll drive. They're like, no, you're going in an ambulance. I'm like, I don't need an ambulance. I'm fine. Typical. But yeah,
I feel like that's in your bloodline.
Yeah, I think so. But we ended up, they're like, nope, you're going in an ambulance. I'm like, all right, well, they're like, well, we'll get a hold of your wife. And I'm like, no, you won't. I'm going to call her. Mm-hmm. At least if she knows that I'm calling, it ain't that bad.
Right.
I can at least explain what's happened. So, called her up. She's panicking. She's like, I knew it was you. She's all upset. And I'm like, yeah. I said, it's all good. I said, I'm fine. So, I ended up, like I said, had some second-degree burns on the side of my face, first and second on top of my head. I had to kind of watch what I did for, a few weeks till the side of my face healed up a little bit. But
Yeah.
so after that, we didn't have a scanner in the house, though.
You're right. Yeah.
I kind of took that away.
Yeah.
And again, it was just to kind of keep her from getting that again.
Yeah.
So being able, and she did. We had one in the house, but like I said, religiously it was on all the time until that call.
Yeah.
And then after that, it disappeared for a while, and then it got brought back out later on. But yeah, we didn't have it on religiously after that. Mm-hmm. So.
So what are some of the other larger scenes that you've been on?
I got involved with the ambulance service, and again, being involved in that was a little bit different than, the fire side. Like I said, you had the opportunity of, on the fire, we would show up and we initially deal with the patient and then hand them off to the ambulance, and they would transport. Being on the ambulance side of okay, now we're accepting this patient and we're transporting them to a hospital. That was a little bit different, but one of the first calls that I ran that was probably a larger scene with the ambulance was a vehicle accident on the highway. We had gotten called for a van that had rolled over multiple patients, unknown how many at the time, and we happened to be the closest ambulance, jumped in the truck, we're taking off and going to the call, and as we're going, we keep getting more updates of more patients. I think our grand total ended up being 18 patients in a single passenger. It was a large van.
Very large.
Yeah,
would have to be.
19 patients, and again, I'm sure that not all of them were in proper seating areas.
Right.
But yeah, and it was wintertime. It was cold. It was snowy. The van lost control and rolled over. I don't know how many times. We happened to be the first truck on scene, and normally when that happens, you kind of take over a command role as far as patients and things like that. Differently again than the fire scene. The fire scene, we take over a command role and dealing with, okay, let's secure the vehicle, make sure that that's good. The patients we're going to hand off to the, ambulance. This time it was, okay, we're there. We need to start looking at what we have for patients and how many ambulances are we going to start needing? What else do we need? So that was my first opportunity, I guess, of being involved in that, is a large scale call with multiple patients that you're doing triage, and then I ended up being a triage officer on the call. And again, I'd had years of experience of dealing with some of that stuff on the fire side, but this is the first time doing it on the ambulance side, and it was almost, am I ready for this, really? I'm telling, other medics and, the helicopter at that point, what patient's coming next. Nobody's getting on an ambulance, nobody's getting on a helicopter unless this person's next, that one's next.
So how many people did you have helping you in that role?
Well, initially when we got there, we had 3 of us on the truck. The senior guy that was on the truck ended up taking over the command role and told the other 2 of us, you guys go out and then figure out what we have for patients. So start getting me a count, getting me an idea of, med levels. So initially when we started there, it was the 3 of us until, other units started showing up. And then once we gave him a patient count, which initially I think was 17, and we said, okay, this is what we need more ambulances, we need, a helicopter. We had one patient that had actually died in the call. So we're going through and I guess setting triage and what patients are higher priority, lower priority, who needs to go next, what patients need to go on the helicopter. We found out as well later on, and I don't know so much that it was our doing on the EMS side, but we had the helicopter land, which ended up basically blocking the exit of all of our ambulances, so they couldn't get past until the helicopter took off. So,
So were you on like a 2-lane highway?
Yeah, it was a divided highway.
Okay.
So, the helicopter actually landed between our scene and the next exit, so they couldn't get through the median.
Right.
So, and again, not saying that it was necessarily our issue or the fire department's issue, it's just one of those things that, as the scene is evolving, something we didn't think about. So,
You don't think about it until you've
right.
already stepped in it.
We had patients in an ambulance, we had a couple ambulances sitting there waiting because they couldn't go until the helicopter took off. So, yeah, that was a little different. And then, we were kind of going through all of that until we find out that towards the end of it, we had some people come up to us that were in a car and they asked about, who was going to take care of the baby. And we're going, What?
The baby? Who had a baby?
So apparently, in the accident, this baby was, all these people, there was nobody inside the vehicle. Everybody was thrown from the vehicle. They were laying in the ditch, they were whatever. This baby was laying in the ditch crying, and apparently somebody had stopped, one of the passerbys had stopped and picked the baby up and brought it in their vehicle to get warm. So at that point in time, we still didn't know that that was a patient until towards the end. And then we're like, what?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And again, I mean, you deal with those scenes. I mean, they're chaotic. You know, you got that many patients. It's, you know, you try to go through and get everything, but when you don't see something like that, I mean, we had cars parked on the side of the highway. You know, were you part of this? Were you part of? No. You know, okay, so you try to get all the information you can, but then you find out, oh yeah, we picked this kid up. You know, which again, I'm sure they did it with the right intention. You know, but there again, for us, it you know, now okay, we have another patient that we need to have transported. So,
I'm trying to think of my biggest patient count that I've had. I think it's been 9 on one scene, so not quite as big as that one, but I think there's a certain threshold where it's just kind of
yeah.
chaotic.
Whether it's 3 or 20,
Yeah, right.
I don't think it's going to matter. As you're dealing with some of that, it's just how long that's going to go.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of do a lot of the same things.
Yeah. So, what about in the fire service?
Fire service, you know, we've had a few calls. One with the paid on call department. We had, you know, an ammonia leak at one of our factories. That one, I think it was like 26, 27 hours that we were on scene. We called hazmat teams from, you know, larger departments in the city area. We had other, I guess, experts per se in some of the chemical aspect that came there from, I think, Amway. We had contacts for some of those people that came out. It was an anhydrous ammonia leak for a factory that we had that, you know, produced juice. Initially, the call came out for a leak, smell of the anhydrous ammonia.
And how often does that call get toned out?
Not very.
Yeah.
Not very. That ended up being that the factory was, you know, trying to continue to run and do what they did. They thought they had the valves shut off. You know, the department responded. I actually was not on the initial response because I was at work for my regular job. And they continued to, you know, keep getting high levels of readings, finding out the stuff wasn't all shut off, all the valves didn't get shut off, so finally everybody got evacuated from the building. You know, the fire chief at that point said, okay, we're done, everybody's coming out, we're getting, you know, other hazmat teams here, this is becoming more than what we can deal with. And we ended up, you know, cutting a hole through the side of the building. We sprayed water on it to help dilute the, you know, anhydrous ammonia that was coming out of the building. And I couldn't tell you, it was probably close to 1 million gallons of water that we sprayed just to dilute that until we could get things secured. Mm-hmm. You know, their hazmat teams came in, they would do stuff. We were doing our decontamination stuff, so when those crews went in, fire departments, you know, out doing decon, so we're, you know, scrubbing these guys down. They're in fully encapsulated suits, air packs. I mean, we had guys that had gone in initially, which we can do certain things for a certain amount of time with our gear. We had a couple guys that went to the hospital, headaches, you know, redness of the skin, you know, just generally not feeling well. And then, yeah, just the whole time, it's like 27 hours. I mean, we were there spraying water.
I've always been interested in, like, specialty teams,
Yeah.
but not hazmat.
Yeah.
That is-
That's a whole different, there's a lot of things out there that can do a lot of harm,
Yeah.
and doesn't take a lot of it to do it.
I don't want to get anywhere
That's-
near it. Yeah.
That's one of those things. Not to mention the fact, being in a self-contained breathing apparatus with a mask that you can take off.
Hey, you're talking about one of the Gumby suits, right?
Well, with us in the fire department, we have our SCBA, which is that self-contained breathing apparatus. So we got the pack, we got the mask. But then now you do that inside another suit.
Right. That's like a.
So that's the hazmat level A suit that's completely encapsulated, zipped up in the back. You're now strapped into this thing and it's sealed. And your only lifeline is, again, what's on this mask until you get out of it.
Right.
This is where you're at. So you got to watch your air and all. That part's a little different. So.
Were you a part of the hazmat team
No.
ever?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I just the fire department training that we do for,
Which is at a base level.
yeah.
Right.
Which is our, awareness and operations, which is where we're able to help with the decon and things like that. So,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah. So you also had a pretty big call up north, right?
yeah, not very long of being on the department up there, we got involved in a MABUS incident, which is a mutual aid box alarm system where they called a bunch of different departments to come in and help with a large fire that was up in the UP. So we had a bunch of us, we met at, a point of departure. We had, I think at that time there were a couple of trucks that were going from our area. And then I think we picked up, maybe 8 people from our area. And then we met up a little further up, probably closer to Petoskey area for, other departments that were coming from down by Brighton area. So, I mean, this was a large scale paper mill fire that, the local department just completely taxed. Their departments that were mutual aid to them that were close. I mean, they just had so much time that they'd been on the call. I think they were there for almost 2-3 days before we even got on scene. So that was, again, this thing's actively burning this whole time. So that was a pretty good experience to be part of, to watch how we're able to pull resources from other areas to help, mitigate that fire. So,
Did it get to the level where there was federal involvement?
they did. Initially, when we first got there, I think it was, they had just gotten some of the Michigan resources and monies to call it a state of emergency. And then it happened to be right next to a river as well. So shortly after that, I know EPA was involved with everything there, looking at a lot of the runoff and things like that.
Describe that a little bit more.
So
people know what you're talking
the
about.
runoff is, when you're putting a lot of water onto the fire, that water's going somewhere. It doesn't just disappear because the fire's hot and it, some will, but you have a lot of runoff. And so that initially was running to where it was going into the river at the very beginning stages of the fire. Well, they ended up bringing in a lot of sand to dam up, like basically catch all the runoff that was coming off that we were spraying onto the fire to put it out. They were catching all that water and basically created a huge lake at the back end of this building, which the building was very large. It had multiple businesses in it. One of them was a extinguisher, of all things, manufacturer. And they had all the paper products that was, like paper mulch after it had been mulched up and it's dry and just bundles stacked up, ceiling height within a factory. And not exactly sure still what initially caused it. But once it got going, there was no way they were going to put it out. So, yeah, they called for a bunch of resources up there, and we got to go up there, and I think we were there almost a week. We drove up there. I think we got on the scene around noon. I think I finally went to bed about 2 o'clock that morning. Was back at 6 o'clock the following morning. So
That's a day.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then we got kind of more on a regular schedule to where, okay, hey, we're going to have this crew stay. And then we did kind of 12-hour shifts to where, we'd get off at a certain time and we'd come back. And so but there again, I mean, that was working with multiple different agencies, multiple different fire departments. We had EPA involved again, like I said. We had to catch all the runoff. That stuff all got, put into tankers. So it was then considered a hazmat because it's gone through the fire. They were worried about PFAS with any of that because apparently there was a bunch stored in one of the buildings from one of the ship makers that was on the river. So again, just that large of an incident, because after we left, I think they were still there. I think they ended up being there for probably another 3 to 4 weeks before everything was kind of mitigated to the point where the fire was pretty well out by the time we were leaving, but they still had so much more to do of getting things under control, taking care of, the runoff, the water that's there. So
What was it like working with so many departments? Like, how familiar were you with?
Again, these people were people that I hadn't seen prior to. I mean, a couple of them I had seen here, there on calls, but not really anybody that you'd work with normally. And again, some of these departments from down by, downstate that I had never seen these guys before. But there again, some of that's the training. We're running a truck, we're, formulating a plan. How are we going to access this? We're going to, get in here. I ended up kind of running the north side of the building for a while on the shifts that I worked. Basically, I had a crew of people. This is what we need to do. Would talk to whoever the incident commander was, formulating a plan on how we're going to get in there. So, that was an experience of being able to be involved with that.
Did it go work out pretty well?
Oh yeah, it actually, I mean, once we got there, and again, we showed up to help them. I think at some point in time they kind of thought, hey, these guys are coming in here to take over, and definitely that's not the case. We were there to help. Which that's why any of us get into this job to begin with. We want to help. We want to do what we can. But yeah, it actually went very, very well, and that's some of that training of the incident command system that we deal with.
Yeah.
You have somebody that's in charge, and then you have certain leaders that run a certain area. It could be a division. It could be this side of the building. It could be a floor on a high-rise building. So so you kind of use that chain of command a little bit, and that chain of command follows through with small innocent incidents that we might be on to something as large as that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, as I'm starting to progress a little bit further into my career, it's the bigger scenes that definitely get my attention. Those are the ones that I really
right.
enjoy. But that's probably where I find my most enjoyment.
Right.
It's been a while since I've had multiple patients and stuff like that, but
Right.
yeah. So kind of, I guess, a hot topic in the first response world is mental health for first responders and stuff like that. What kind of experiences have you witnessed or been a part of in regards to that?
Well, personal involvement. again, I mean, I've been on a lot of calls, a lot of personal things. Obviously, you know, my first time doing CPR was my dad. We had a mindset almost when I got into the fire service of suck it up. And I'm not saying that that was bad for what they were doing at the time. Just kind of the way they dealt with it. You know, hey, suck it up. You know, you'll be good. Don't worry about it. Or if you can't do it, you know, maybe I don't want you here type thing a little bit too. And that has definitely changed.
Yeah.
You know, that type of mentality is not where the fire service, EMS, you know, law enforcement, any of the first response stuff, even in the military, it's changing a lot. But yeah, I've had quite a few experiences over my career of being involved with, you know, calls that, you know, maybe, you know, didn't affect me as much as some, and probably others I know that it probably affected me more than others. So, you know, my first kind of big experience with some of that was, you know, again, dealing with stuff with my dad. I didn't like have to reach out and go talk to too many people other than, you know, family or whatever. But you know, we had one of our firefighters that had actually committed suicide. That was a real close friend, and that was kind of one of those things where you have that family, you have that fire family, your personal family is involved. The individual was at our house all the time. Ironically, the day before, he was at my house talking, trying to, you know, going through a rough spot with a girlfriend, you know, was worried about he's going to have to leave the department. And, you know, we're going, hey, you know, don't worry about this, man. You're going on vacation tomorrow. Just go get away. Go, you know, spend time with some family. You know, you're going to be able to do that. You know, the next day, I actually talked to him that day. I had sent a message out about our pagers that we carry, needing serial numbers, just doing inventory stuff, make sure we had everything correct. And he actually called me that day and said, hey, this is what I've got, blah, blah, blah. And ironically, had no clue. No clue. Now, looking back, after getting more information later on, that he actually ended up calling a bunch of other people within the department, my wife that time, just saying, hey, thanks, appreciate it. You know, certain things, talked to one of the local police officers, you know, like, hey, appreciate everything you've done, man, helping out. Just had any of us talked that day, prior to what had happened, we might have known something was up, but we didn't. And it was not that we would have known necessarily, but I remember getting a call up to the chief's office. I was working the department that day, and he asked me the last time I had talked to the individual, and I'm like, earlier, I don't know why. You know, he's like, well, what time was it? And he was on the phone. And I'm like, I don't know, I have to go grab my phone. So I run down, grab my phone, and I'm like, I talked to him about this here. And he's like, okay. And he was talking on the phone, and I could tell there was something going on. I wasn't quite sure what, but I could tell something was happening. And he hung up the phone, and he's like, you know, basically, you know, Mark killed himself. We found him at work. I was like, oh. And I'm like, I just talked to him. It was just this. I'm like, no. You know, so we have that kind of, like, you don't believe it. And then, again, with what we do, I mean, we're running calls. I mean, I'm on call that day. So we end up, ironically, get a call for a suicide threat. And while I'm on that call, my phone starts blowing up. We start getting everybody on the department starts finding out what's happening. And, you know, people that lived across the street, one of our guys lived right across the street from where he lived, and found out through his girlfriend, because they found out now what's going on. And I'm like, hey, we'll be there in a minute. Kind of tied up on a call, be there in a minute. You know, so that was probably the first real big where it hit home. Not only on the department side, but the family side. We, you know, again, my kids hung out with them all the time. You know, my wife and we hung out all the time, going to dinners, you know, cookouts, whatever. You know, and again, you know, then not only do you have the department side of things of, you know, we got a lot of guys on the department that were close with the individual, but now you got your personal family as well, and trying to deal with some of that. We did some debriefings through there, and ironically, and I think it helped. I mean, we talked as a department probably 3 times. You know, once shortly after, you know, once, you know, we actually sat down. I think it was, you know, before we ended up doing funeral stuff, and then I think we talked again after. And by the 3rd time, everybody kind of had that same mindset of, we don't want to do this again.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about it again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, you, like I said, you get those calls that you have, you know, individual things that you might deal with on the department. But when, you know, your department's close and you have a lot of people that you hang out with, your family's close, that brings in a little different dynamic.
And then essentially the call is
Right.
part of the department. It's on somebody from the department.
Yeah. So, you know, and again, was close with family, still talk to, you know, his mom, you know, that was another thing that, you know, we had a kind of core group of guys that were within the department that all kind of hung out together. And, you know, he was that one of those type of guys that he could hang out with anybody. You know, he was always in our core group, but, you know, if we didn't hang out with a, you know, certain group of guys that, you know, had different interests, I mean, he would still be able to get along with all that. I mean, he was that type of person, always active, always being there, wanting to be involved. You know, we knew that there were struggles. Again, like I said, I mean, I talked to him the night before, and I had no clue that things were anywhere near that bad. No idea that he was anywhere close to having thoughts like that. So that was kind of a shock. And then, like I said, you know, we sit and talk about, you know, these things within the debriefings and all that, and I'm like, I don't think I need to go to that. And then you sit and think about it, and, you know, by this time, you know, I'm quite a few years in the department. You know, I'm probably looked at a little bit differently. You know, guys look up to me for advice, things like that. You know, and I'm thinking, well, if I go to this thing and, you know, guys see that there's things that affect me, that it might be easier for them, you know, some of the newer guys.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we had that, and like I said, it got to the point towards the end of that we were like, okay, we've done 3 debriefings on this, and we don't really want to talk about it again. You know, did it help? I think so. I mean, we were able to talk and see that, you know, other people, and we talked amongst our group of guys, like those of us that were in this close group. You know, we talked outside of that, you know, and I think that helped, you know, having that. And again, you know, with that kind of core group that we had, you know, we had the spouses and all of them that were involved, so they ended up talking, and, you know, we would talk, and, you know, so I think having that network helped a lot.
Being able to process stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, whether or not, you know, we had enough processing through that, I don't know. You know, we still kind of had that somewhat of a macho mentality, I think, still.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, you know, I'm fine, I'm good. You know, but, you know, things start to change. So you get to, you know, more calls. You know, we used to run calls nonstop, it seemed like, but, you know, we ran a lot of calls that, you know, were people in the community that we'd see, and then, you know, we'd get going through that, and, you know, we had another call that came in, you know, a few years later, which happened to be one of our guys that had retired, that was in that core group, you know, of, you know, people that would all get together. We, you know, always go to their house, and, you know, they'd come over, we'd, like I said, have barbecues, we'd have pool parties, whatever it would be. But, you know, we ended up getting another call with one of our other guys that I was on call that night, and got called for a possible class 1, which is CPR basically in progress, no pulse, not breathing. As soon as I heard the address, I knew exactly who it was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and again, was another close friend that, you know, had been involved. At that point, he had resigned from the department, stepped away just because he had other things going on in life and didn't have time. But we still stayed in touch. I mean, we would still go hang out, you know, all the time. So, but, you know, we run that call, and, you know, a lot of those same guys that were in that core group were on that call. So, you know, here we're, you know, showing up, and again, I was the first one there. You know, his wife was a nurse, so, I mean, she obviously has experience with that.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, when it's your significant other, that's a whole different ballgame too.
Or close friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, we got to a point with that, you know, and again, you know, all the people that are responding, you know, from the fire department, you know, just knowing who it is, you know, guys that weren't on call, going,
Right.
okay, hey, this is one of ours. You know, and then, you know, I get there, and, you know, the ambulance is there, and again, I've worked with these people that are on the ambulance, you know, they know me, you know, and I'm, you know, they see that I'm there, you know, guys are kind of getting, you know, like amped up because, hey, man, this is one of our old guys, and, you know, I kind of tell everybody, take a step back. I'm like, slow down a minute.
Mm-hmm.
We have a job. Let's do what we need to do. And I said, the rest of this is going to follow.
Right.
So after doing that, the scene kind of calmed right down.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you know, I got a hold, actually my wife at the time heard the address. When I hopped up out of bed, she knew where I was going. So she came over because she was very good friends with his wife. So, you know, here again, here's that close family dynamic of you got fire department, and then you got your personal family.
Yeah.
So, and we did. We worked that call and ended up transporting him to the hospital. Got some pulses for a while and then lost them again, to where we ended up going down to the ER. And they ended up calling him at the ER. So, and then again, dealing with the family aspect. Knew the brothers, knew the mom and dad, you know, dealing with them as they're coming into the hospital. You know, my wife shows up now with my kids.
Mm.
So the personal side of the things are what still gets, I think, most of us.
Yeah.
So, like I said, you know, we dealt with that and, you know, went through a bunch of calls but then things change. You know, you start noticing that you don't get out as much. You don't really, like, you almost kind of pull back from certain things, you know. You know, after doing all of that and some of the calls, it just, some people, like, it's like they don't understand some of the things that we do, you know, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, when we got doing some of that, I basically got to a point where I noticed that I didn't start having as many close group anymore. You know, at that point, my involvement with people outside of my family got probably smaller. You know, we didn't start going out and doing a lot of stuff with some of our other friends that we would, you know, normally deal with that maybe weren't on the fire department or weren't involved in EMS or police or something like that. So we started, you know, kind of scaling, and I think that was more on my end than my wife at the time, to kind of do that.
Was it just in a sense of like wanting to be around your own people, or?
No, I think for me at that point in time of, you know, once we got to that with, you know, the first one again was, you know, I had talked with him the day before, you know, and then you know, the other one a few years later, you know, here's a guy that, you know, we hang out, do things all the time, and we coach together. We did a lot of things outside of the department as well, and you know, it's maybe not letting as many people in on my end.
Yeah.
So we ended up again dealing with that, and again, like I said, for me, the worst part of that, and knowing the family, but you got to deal with your own family as well. So that was probably the hardest part of dealing with some of those. And then throughout this, you're still running calls.
Yeah.
So you're still running calls, working on an ambulance. I can tell you the day that I came back to work after dealing with, I actually took some time off, which doesn't happen very often. But the day that I came back, I was working on the ambulance. We ran 3 Class 1s that day. On the 3rd Class 1, I actually was, after everything was kind of done, I called the supervisor and I said, hey, just give me a heads up. I said, if you get another call, it's going to be a CPR call involving this truck, you better send another truck. Very rarely have I been to a point like that where I was like, okay, I'm done. You know?
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, when I was there, I did my job, but it was sitting there thinking afterwards, like, I just got done doing this 3 times today.
Yeah.
You know, so.
It's the time period when you clear the hospital and you're driving back to your service area.
Yeah.
Where it's just like everything kind of hits you. When you're in the mode, I mean, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're in the mode of actually running the call,
Oh, yeah.
you're just,
fine.
yeah, it's
You-
muscle memory, training, whatever.
But you fall back into your training and what you do, and, you know, you have a job to do, and you do it to the best of your ability. You know, so I think for the most part, yeah, during the actual call, that's probably the easiest part of the deal.
Yeah. It's when it ends. It's,
You know, and then that was the same thing with the 3 calls after. During, I didn't have, I'm like, other than, this isn't good, here we go again. But I didn't have any thought thoughts, whatever, other than, okay, this is our job, this is what we need to do, this is the next step, this is the next process that we need to do. It was afterwards, like I said, I mean, got out to the truck, sat there, and I'm like, that's when I called the supervisor, and I'm like, yeah, just, if we have any more of these, you're gonna have to send somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah, it's afterwards is. I mean, I've had one brush where I wanted to bring in a family member into the hospital, and she was it was potentially a stroke, wasn't sure what's going on, significantly altered or whatever, but you kind of go through your job or whatever, and then when you wind up clearing that call, clearing the hospital, and it's like, wow, that really sucked. Like,
Yeah.
most people don't really have to. Most people, I don't think, fathom the idea of like running on a close friend or family member and being that involved with something as potentially critical happening.
Right.
Or,
Right.
being there as things are happening. For the people that have experienced it, they're the only ones that can truly know, like,
Right.
what that feels like.
Oh, yeah. And I, not to sound cold, but, I've ran calls on people in my career that either I've known, I mean, again, being in a small community, you get to know a lot of people, especially if you've been there for a while. I've ran calls on, kids of friends that we've, known. People that, are in the community that we know. I've ran calls on, kids that I've coached, and that still isn't great.
Mm-hmm.
But, when you have such a close connection to some of those calls that you run,
Yeah.
I think that makes a whole different dynamic to that aspect. And again, throughout all of that, other than talking with, the guys at the department that know a little bit about what we're doing, that's pretty much the extent of anything that I did,
Yeah.
you know. And, you know, we would get together at certain times to, you know, in remembrance of, you know, this individual or that individual. We'd get together and, you know, there's times when we still will do that, you know. For me, I mean, I still, every year, will go to, you know, the guy that I talked about that, you know, I had talked with and was in our close circle, you know, I still, every year, will go to his gravesite every year. I mean, if it's not on that day, it's pretty close.
Yeah.
And, yeah, you know, it's just, you try to find a way to deal with that,
Yeah.
you know, so.
And it's a lot to do with finding what works best for you too, because
Right.
a lot of
Oh, yeah.
people handle it in a lot of
Right.
different ways. So
Thankfully for me, I guess there's a good thing. The substance abuse aspect, I've never really got involved with. I mean, you hear a lot of this where, you know, the guys or gals or whoever's involved potentially start doing a lot more drinking or, you know, might get involved in something else. I think we all do something. Obviously, I drink Monsters, you know, like they're water. You know, I've smoked throughout my, you know, career of doing this as well. But I've never really gotten involved with anything else to help with that. And I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody else that has, or it's just, I guess I'm fortunate for that. But then my thing was, I'd always go back to work.
mm-hmm.
You know, that was my way of getting through things. Okay, hey, we're gonna go back to work. We're gonna do more of this. You know, so and, you know, when talking about the change of where things are from, you know, the initial days of being on the department of, you know, suck it up, you know, if you talk about it, you're weak or whatever. You know, I go to the ambulance service where I make that phone call to a supervisor. I had no follow-up.
Yeah.
There was never a, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Never had a call, you know, later, hey, checking to see how you're doing, what's up. So,
Yeah.
So I think we're making a lot of changes to that
Yeah.
for the better. So I think that's an improvement for sure.
Yeah. I think we're trying to get into the right direction, but we're still trying to figure it out as a first response community, because there's,
Right.
I mean, we're still getting a lot of people falling to the wayside, and I know that you know that.
And the unfortunate thing is there's no set way. What works for you might not work for me, or, you know, something. There's so many differences, and, you know, I guess what people are experiencing and what they're dealing with. They're different, you know, your experiences might be different than mine, and, you know, so to say that there's a cookie cutter way of this is how we do it,
Yeah.
you can't.
No.
And I think that's what is also challenging with bringing this to light more,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and finding what works. So,
Yeah. I think a lot of it is know your people, for like the leaders,
Right.
and from the leaders within the different organizations, departments and agencies, that sort of thing. Because, yeah, everybody's going to react to different things differently. I've known you for a really long time.
couple
And
years.
if you would have called me and said, you got to send another unit, like that would be a huge red flag from me hearing that coming from you.
Right.
And I guess I don't really, it's kind of, if I could take a third party role, if I was to say that, that would be a huge red flag too, because
Oh, yeah.
I think I've said maybe once in 10 years where it's like, I need a minute.
Yep.
Like, I'm turning my radio off for the next 15 minutes.
Right.
Like, I'm
Yeah.
done. So I need to collect myself. I got my pack of smokes. We're going to
Right.
figure some things out.
Yeah, to be able to get to that point, and again, I'm not saying that I'm better, worse than anybody else. It takes a lot for me to get to a point of that, and and then you find out that sometimes it might not be as big of a call that it might react that it's going to bring something back that maybe holy cow, I remember that now. And so yeah, it's not always about, hey, I've done more, I've been involved in more. I'm not trying to say that I'm putting any of my experiences out here as a trophy about look at me, look at what I've done,
Right.
because it's definitely not that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that some of my experiences are based on the number of calls that I've ran within my years, not just within a department, but with an ambulance. And I think about that. For me, I think some of the ambulance side of things was me trying to get a different experience, meaning I'm running too much stuff close to home.
Uh-huh.
This is going to be my opportunity to do this somewhere else,
Uh-huh.
where maybe I won't know as many of these people.
How'd that work?
Not good.
Yeah, good.
Not good. Yeah, I mean, but I honestly, and I, take a look at my full-time job. I think that was even that as well.
Yeah.
Me going to an area that I
Is-
don't know anybody.
Yeah. I mean, how long of a drive is it to get to your
It's about
fire
an hour and
station?
45 minutes from me to
Yeah.
get to work.
Yeah.
One way.
Yeah. But getting back to the ambulance stuff, you're on the same ambulance system that you're running with
Right.
in your local area, right?
Right. Yeah, and so, I mean, but it was nice because I was able to get out a little bit more.
It was a bigger coverage area.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
we
you
would
could flip
run-
on the other
we
side of
would
the
run
county.
Calls in the community that I grew up and live in, but I'm also running calls in places where I really don't know who these people are. So the overall volume of calls in my area when I'm working on the ambulance are way less
Yeah.
than me working on the fire department in my area.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think for me that was initially some of that thought of why I did it.
Yeah.
To get a change.
Mm-hmm.
So, I got to a point where, I just, I need to make a change.
Yeah. So, with the running on the ambulance service, you still stuck. A lot of times you were still in your local area, right?
A lot of times, yeah.
Did
Yep.
any of that wound up like spilling over into EMS too?
Oh, absolutely. I think I should probably maybe preface this a little bit by, before I get to that, with the running on the ambulance, I obviously ran a lot more shifts doing that. I still ran my calls and call volume with the department as well, which limited my involvement, I think, with family as much. So during that process, it kind of got down to a point where I find myself not going to certain events, like, hey, let's go do this. Nah, I don't want to. If I was home and I wasn't, on an ambulance, or if I wasn't on call, I don't want to go there. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, are you talking about like personal events, like birthday parties or whatever?
Family stuff. Well, normally like close family things, yeah. But going out with friends or going some.
Right.
So that really started to dwindle, to the point where, again, this is the effect that it carries over into the family side. We didn't go do a whole lot. I mean, I would still be involved with sports stuff with my kids, when I wasn't on call or when I wasn't working. That changed from when I was younger. I took time off from work to do those things. I think just involving myself so much into the job, was my way of, dealing with some of those things. And I think we, kind of stopped having as much conversation about some of that stuff family-wise. I know for a fact that, if stuff was going on with work, I didn't talk about it at home.
Uh-huh.
My kid, my oldest daughter, got involved with an individual that was on our department, that was in a cadet program. So he was a new guy, got involved. I mean, he'd come over. I mean, that's who we would hang out with, people that were in that circle.
Okay.
There were certain firefighters that we'd hang out with. Outside of that, we didn't go do much, So that led up to, for me, a lot of personal sacrifices that I think, let go. And I basically, stuck with the work side of things instead of, the family side as much. 25 years of marriage ended during this time.
Yeah.
And again, we had our moments of, we had issues or what's going on here where, I didn't talk about things, they weren't telling me things, stuff that was going on. So yeah, that changed some of the dynamics a little bit. I would still run calls. I'd come home, they were like, hey, we're going to go do this. I'm like, all right, well, see you when you get back. Didn't really get involved a whole lot. And, that's where things kind of just finally came to an end on the whole marriage side. And again, not that to this day, I can still communicate with her. We get along. Obviously, during that time, things were a little more vocal and rough with, emotions. But I think for me, a lot of that is just I backed away from that. And I think for me, I was thinking that I was doing the right thing about protecting them a little bit by not involving them in some of that stuff.
Right.
Some of my own personal things that were going on within, the department, and but I think that had a lot to do with where things went there. So
yeah.
like I said, we ended up finally getting a divorce, and, thankfully my kids were older, could understand. I had one kid that was still in school. But we were able to communicate with that and talk, and, like I said, today we can, get along and all go out together. It's not a big deal. Just the dynamic changed, and it got to a point where it wasn't working.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, that kind of leads into other calls from the ambulance. You get to a point where, you go a while and things are good. You're running calls and, staying busy. And then, you pick up a shift, and for me, I ended up, running another real close friend that was a suicide, that actually had dated my daughter. I was in this close social group that we had, and I ran that working on the ambulance. So kind of in that same area. This call was a little different for me. I didn't know where we were going. The address wasn't familiar. The age of the patient was close, but I'm not thinking anything about it. We're going on a call. We got told it was a self-inflicted gunshot. We're staging, waiting for police to secure a scene. We're still responding because of the distance from our station, and we're told we can go in. By the time we're walking up, the fire department had already been there. They were kind of walking away. Police had said that, hey, this is going to be, a code K at that point, which for us normally is that, they're beyond help. They're not going to be able to do anything. So we walk up, and, again, here's the scene of, we have somebody laying on the ground next to a vehicle, and you do your job. You're going in, you're checking things out, and, we're assessing the scene, patient, to see what's going on, and midway through that is when I recognized him. And like I said, this is a year ago, so pretty close, pretty fresh. I've got, again, not only you do your job on scene, we deal with that. My partner that was there, I kind of felt bad for them. Again, not knowing that I know who this is that's there on this call.
When did they realize that you knew who he was?
When I made a comment on scene, I said, for the love of God, tell me that this is not who this is. And the look on my partner's face at that time was kind of like, oh, man. County was there. Again, you talk about tunnel vision. We try to not have that on scenes. We try to not have that on fire calls. We try to not do that in accidents. Try not to do it on an EMS call just because you don't want to be, focused on one thing and not see the big picture. In the EMS world, you kind of do a little bit of that with, okay, all this stuff is going on, but here's my patient. This is what I need to focus on. So that's kind of what we were doing. Again, we were just getting into that, and I was like, are you kidding me? The call was fine. Of course, we do our job, do what we have to do. I ended up calling, getting times for a time of death from, dispatch. I talked with the deputies on scene about, getting a hold of parents. Told them, hey, let his parents know that I was here. I know that they're not going to just, call them on the phone. I know that they're going to go make notification. And I said, hey, that it might help to have them know that I was here. And so going through, like I said, that process of that scene, while I'm there, I was fine. Because you kind of get into that work mode. Got to do this, and this is some other things. You got to take care of, this aspect. You need this information, or you need that information, and doing all of that was okay.
Yeah.
Of course, we get cleared from the call, and just down the road was another one of our firefighters from where this incident happened that used to be on the department, is not anymore, but was still close friends with the individual, and had a brother that was very close friends with the individual that also used to be on our department. So as we're coming back away from there, I'm starting now thinking I need to start letting some people know what's going to happen here. Like, I know his parents are going to get told, but there's like department people, or, because he also worked on another fire department as well. So then I started thinking, man, I got to make contacts there to kind of make sure that, hey, I just want to give you a heads up. This is what's going on.
So the first response community is such a tight-knit group. I mean, there's a lot of firefighters, but there's a lot of firefighters that know all of the firefighters,
Right.
And it's kind of like, what is the most appropriate manner to wind up
Right.
hearing this from?
Well, the individual that I contacted from the other department was on our department when the individual took the full-time job, basically kind of stepped away because they had to, but was still in that group, same core group of the other two that were on our department that would always hang out and always do stuff. So was very close friends with this individual as well, as worked with him, on shift all the time. So we dealt, I'm like, I've at least got to make contact there so that he could inform the other department that this is what's going on. And making that phone call, I knew, we had been through this before with, the other individual that was, he was the one that lived across the street from the other individual. So we had dealt with this once before with one of the guys, and this one was a little closer. Like I said, he worked with him quite a bit, and again, for me, I mean, the kid lived at my house for a while, was a great firefighter. This kid got to a point where I was trying to keep up with him. I mean, he loved the job. He loved doing what he did. He did well at the other department that was full-time. And again, that was, for me, that here it is hitting home. So, I stopped and made conversation with, the guy that lived down the street, knowing that he would get a hold of his brother, because I wanted him to know. Because those two were still very close, the other brother. At that point in time, this individual had kind of pulled away from some of the rest of us, with having some struggles, not only with work, personal things like that. So we weren't as close at that point in time. And I think for me, some of it was just, he didn't want me to know as much of what was going on.
Yeah.
So, but, yeah, we made, a few phone calls there. I ended up getting a call back from the sergeant that was on that scene from the police department saying that they had made contact with family. And, of course, he's, same thing, says, hey, if you need something, reach out. There's resources out there. And I said, yeah, I know. I understand. So, after that, I was still on shift. Thankfully, we didn't have any more calls. I was getting out of work that morning early because I had to go work at my job up north. So I needed that time to drive north. And so I wasn't sure at that point. I had called up north and said, hey, just letting you know, this is kind of what happened. Not sure what's going to happen on my end yet. Not sure where all this is going to play out. The personal side of that, again, is what was hard. Dealing with a call, you can do that every day. I had to call my kid, my daughter, that dated him. She was not dating him at the time. So I called her and said, hey, what's up? Kind of told her what happened. And, said, listen, where are you at? And she was at home. She asked me what was going on. And of course, she had knew some of the stuff that had been going on with him as well. And, I told her, I said, look, if you need me to, I can come by the house, whatever you want to do. I said, I'm supposed to go up to work. And she goes, no. She goes, why don't you go to work? She goes, I'll go to Mom's. And I said, okay. I said, you sure you're going to be okay to do that? Again, she was quite upset, obviously. And it got to the point where she's like, yeah, I'm going to be good. She goes, but you got to call Mom. She goes, because I can't tell her. So I said, okay. I said, I'll do that. So I called her. She goes, you need to do it quick, though. She goes, because I'm probably 5-10 minutes from being there. I'm like, nothing like giving me some time.
Yeah.
So I called my ex-wife at the time, and I said, hey, what are you doing? She's like, what's up? Again, it's, I don't know, by this time, 5 o'clock in the morning. And I said, hey, I hate to call you. I said, and I'm sorry to do it this way, but I don't have a lot of time. I go, is on her way to your house? She's probably 5-10 minutes from being there. And this is the situation. Of course, she was all upset, knowing that I was on that call. She's like, are you doing good? I said, yeah, I'm all right. Just it sucks with this part of it. So I said, are you good? And she's like, yeah. And I said, okay. I said, well, she said she'll be there. She goes, she's pulling in right now. So I'm like, okay. I said, well, at this point, I'm heading to work. I said, if anything changes during this time, let me know. If you need me, I'll come home. I'll come back. And I went to work for 48 hours on my normal shift. For me, that was the ability to separate that personal side of things, I think, again.
And this is the fire department up north, right?
Yeah. I went up there. So, again, not the department that I'd been with, he was with. So I had the opportunity, being up there, of course, talked with the lieutenant that was on shift there. And he's like, you need to go. I said, no. I said, I think I just need to be here. I can do this. We ran calls. We didn't have anything major during that time. And then, during that, I had texted his parents and talked with them. Again, this is somebody that's very close that I've known. I mean, we've been to their house, he stayed at my house. They would talk to me about things that are going on and, hey, I know he's there, whatever. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, again, it was very close for me. And then in that process, he was also close with a lot of coworkers. Not just the fire side, but the EMS side. So obviously I continue to reach out to, them, make sure that, they're doing okay, or, if there's anything that they need, they would do the same with me. So again, here's that community of fire and EMS that's reaching out and helping, talking. It just, that time was, probably a week of just after I got out of my job up north. That's when a lot of those other things hit a lot closer to home.
Yeah.
I had to go actually talk to his mom and dad. That wasn't easy.
No.
Being involved with, again, the funeral stuff that, I had been involved with the other two as well. It's not that I, didn't, but, this one for me was, again, just, it was a lot harder personally. And I think more so some of the family connection was there.
Yeah.
With, my kid, my ex, my other daughter, that, knowing how it affected them. So, and that's some of the, I guess, dynamics that a lot of people don't realize, that the first response world isn't just the worker itself.
I think, it kind of, we say it often, but it kind of ends up just really bringing it to the forefront. Is like, you have your people responding to calls. You have no idea what just came beforehand.
No.
So it's, I would say that that's probably the most paramount I mean, your story is probably more paramount than most, but like, we wound up going through a lot of situations, and it's like, yeah, we're responding to your call too, but you don't know what happened 15 minutes ago,
Right.
and it's just pretty intense. So,
Yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, it's not just necessarily a call. I mean, it could be, something happening at home that you're dealing with before you go to a call, or,
and then especially, I would say probably more for the fire service than probably, I guess I don't really know for law enforcement, but more for the fire service in comparison to the EMS is like, it is one big family.
Yeah.
Like, there is a lot of, I mean, we see it often where it's like, you have a paid-on-call firefighter that gets hired into a full-time position on the other side of the county or whatever, and it's like all of these different departments
Yep.
start having people
That
that
you know, or-
that are really closely connected. So, man, the EMS is right alongside that too, but it's getting better as far as
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, 20 years ago, I mean, this would have been a whole different situation. I mean, I'm not saying that obviously I'm good with everything. Obviously, some of that stuff still is real close to home. Some of that stuff is still pretty fresh that, has been part of some of my experiences. But in the same time that, having that ability to have a network of people to talk with, to, help with experiences, yeah.
yeah.
It's, I mean, and you're seeing more and more of that. And I don't have an answer. I don't know what works best for me is probably not going to work best for you. I've always kind of immersed myself with work, but I don't know if that's always the best way either.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say,
Probably not.
I wouldn't say probably not. I'd say do it with caution.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, I mean, yeah, I do understand. I do understand that it's just like getting done with this and getting on to the next call. I do get that. I think that with my mentality, I'm kind of the same way, where it's just like, had a bad experience here, we're just going to create a new experience and then keep pressing forward.
Right.
But again, that doesn't work for everybody. So, but I mean, I guess that would be a good point to wind up transitioning on. Do you have anything more to say to people considering getting into the first response world or the fire service EMS community?
With all of the things that are going on, I still think that this is probably one of the best jobs in the world. I really do. And I think for me, it's the ability of being able to help when you can, and knowing that also there are times when you can't, but to still be able to be there.
I think that in itself is a bigger help than what you realize.
Yeah.
Because I think in the situations that you've been a part of, but also being that pillar of support to wind up being the one to wind up shouldering the weight and making the notifications and stuff like that, that's pretty profound.
Yeah,
I know you probably don't see it that way, but
Probably, I
yeah,
don't, but you
To
know,
the-
I think if that's what anybody else probably would do,
yeah,
you know, and I kind of have that mentality, but yeah, as far as this job, yeah, there's parts of it that aren't good. There's parts of it that are, you know, going to bring you to, you know, the end of your, I guess, you know, patience. Sometimes there's, you know, you're going to get brought to your physical limits sometimes, you know, on the fire side, even in EMS as well. But there's a lot that is good with what we do.
yeah,
You know, there's a lot of great outcomes. I've had a lot of calls that have not been just gloom and doom. You know, I've been on calls where, you know, we've, you know, got pulses back. We've had people, you know, go on to live normal lives. We've been in car accidents where we get people out of the cars and they do okay, or, you know, all of these things, you know, house fires, you put the fire out as best you can, save as much property as you can, you know. All of those things are the service orientation of the job.
Yeah.
And, you know, that is a rewarding experience,
yeah,
you know, to be able to be part of something like that. And I think, again, for me, that is probably what's pushed me a little bit to continue with some of this.
yeah,
Don't get me wrong, I've had a few moments where I'm going, why do I keep doing this? You know, especially with, you know, for me, some of the things that I've been involved with. But I still think that there's something that I can do to help.
yeah,
And I think for me, that's what's continuing to push me to continue. Yeah. In any job, you're going to have a bad day. I mean, unfortunately, these type of professions could be worse than others, but you definitely try to take the good that goes with that.
I think that's for the other service members, first responders, is focus on those good moments,
Yeah.
as much
Oh.
as you can,
Absolutely.
because that's what's going to keep you in the game.
100%. And, you know, the good moments are what keep you going back.
Yeah,
And, you know, hopefully you continue to have those opportunities to deal with that. But, you know, there again, as time progresses and time moves on, you're still going to run into those situations of you're going to get a bad call, you're going to get a bad day, you
Yeah.
might get a bad week. It could be a bad month, who knows?
yeah,
But, you know, you have times where, and it's weird in this industry that there's times when you run nothing but, you know, easy, good calls, and then there's times when it's nothing but gloom and doom for a while.
right,
And there's no rhyme or reason on why that is, or, you know, where you are at the time of the call. I mean, and I think about that for me, like on these things, you know, the day of, you know, the call on the ambulance, I picked up a shift that I normally wouldn't have worked.
yeah,
Why? You know, why was that in my area that I was on? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is there a reason? Maybe. You know, but
I think a lot of it's dumb luck. EMS, there's
I think a lot of dumb luck as well.
Yeah.
But
no rhyme or reason to it.
No.
I know the administrative part of EMS tries to, like, you know, predict call volume and predict, you know, whatever, and it's like some of those, it's EMS. You can only
Yeah.
predict so much.
Right.
You know.
yeah, I mean, other than that, the only other thing I would have to say of anybody that's, you know, wanting to get involved in this is don't be afraid to talk. I mean, the days of, you know, shut up and suck it up are pretty much over.
Yeah, I think they need
I
to
mean,
be.
there's still some people that will do that, and there's still some mindset to that. even with newer people coming in about, I don't need, and I think that if they know that, hey, there's people that are out there that have been involved in this field and they deal with a lot of the same things that I do,
Yeah.
That might help.
Yeah. Build that network and be able to rely on that network. It's
Right.
pretty huge.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, I've had a great opportunity of working with, some great colleagues, both, fire EMS side, that I respect and admire. I, again, still think that it's probably the best job. I've done odds and ends stuff, but this is something that I've always stayed with.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I like what I do. I really do. I mean, I like being involved. I like being able to help. It's just unfortunate you're gonna, run into situations where you're gonna have calls that, aren't gonna be so good.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Is there anything more that you want to tell the general public, communities out there?
basically the thing with the first response aspect is just know that we're human. I mean, we are going to respond to your call, and we're going to, help. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to be human. We're gonna get emotional on certain things. That we're obviously there with the intent to help, to do the best that we can. Understand that there's certain protocols that we follow. So sometimes, things might not happen as fast as they want, but, there's certain things that we do, and we do them for a reason because this is how we're supposed to.
Mm.
They might not understand some of those things. But I think at the most part, too, if you've got questions, don't hesitate to ask.
Yeah.
I mean, I think anybody, either whether you're talking management side or even, the individual first responders, I mean, if they've got time, they'll be more than happy to explain to you why things are being done the way they are.
Yeah. Because it makes sense in our head.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
To them, they're going, why are they doing what they're doing?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, don't be afraid to ask questions, and, don't be afraid to, talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna, if you want to know what's going on in your community with, your first responders, stop at a fire station, stop at an ambulance station, stop at the police department, talk to them. I mean, anybody that's working in this field and in this service is going to be more than happy to try to help explain what we're doing and why. So,
Yeah.
we're human. Come talk to us. We'll be more than happy to, talk to them.
Is there anything else?
Not that I can think of.
All right. Well, maybe that's a good place to end it. So,
I'm sure there's lots.
yeah, there always is more, but
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming out and sharing your story.
Absolutely.
So, those were some pretty intense moments. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but we want to thank you for joining the Heroes Debrief and listening to Shawn tell his story. Now that we're past the holidays, we're going to be getting back on track going forward with hopefully our weekly releases. And be sure to stay tuned on our social medias for upcoming events and fundraising opportunities, as well as more episodes for the Heroes Debrief.